Okay, it's Toby from Heavyweight MMA here today with a man that really doesn't need any introduction, but I'll do one anyway. Matt the Law Lindland has represented the United States in Greco Roman Wrestling, winning silver at the 2000 Summer Olympics in Sydney, Australia, which we'll talk about in a second, seeing as I'm from Sydney. Also a very decorated MMA career, having fought many fights, 31 fights from what I read. Winning by a variety of KOs, submission, and points, notably against fighters such as Robbie Lawler, Vitor Belfort, Carlos Newton, Fedor Emelianenko, Ronaldo Souza, Jeremy Horn, Rampage Jackson, the list goes on, Mike Van Arsdale, Joe Dirksen, Travis Luder, Tony Frickland, Phil Baroni, Murillo Bustamante, Ricardo Almeida, etc. Very decorated career there, Mr. Lindland.
Yeah, I fought quite a few guys. And
that's it.
And just a little over a decade there.
I was talking to another guy and he said it gives me a headache thinking about it. So Matt, looking back to the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, just interested in what you felt about the country, seeing as I'm from Sydney.
Well, I really enjoyed the games there. They did an amazing job of putting the games together, and I didn't really get to enjoy the country, and neither did my family. My kids and my wife came out to watch. They were both very young. And so my daughter, when she graduated from high school, I owed her a trip to anywhere in the world. And she chose Sydney and Thailand. And we went to Chiang Mai, Thailand. And so I told her that was two places. And she said, that's anywhere. And I was like, you're right. That is anywhere. So we went back to Sydney. We spent 2 weeks in Sydney when she graduated high school. And then we spent 10 more days in Thailand. And we had just had a wonderful trip. So I couldn't argue if my daughter wanted to spend 3 weeks with me and just go on a holiday and take some time off. And, I got to teach some martial arts over there at Martial Arts Development with those dudes over there, great guys. And so they kind of helped fund my trip a little bit. And then same thing in Thailand, I taught a little bit, and that pretty much covered my whole trip, and just had to pay for my daughter. And I remember when we were leaving Thailand, and my room was covered and my travel, and the only thing we had to pay for was like food and the excursions we did, which pretty much daily. It was a holiday, so we did something daily. And I looked in my wallet and I was like, I think we spent like $400 in 10 days. I mean, it was so cheap in Thailand. Sydney was not inexpensive, but we did discover a little franchise food place that we don't have. I think my daughter told me that they now have one in California, somewhere in LA. It's called Pepper Lunch, where they cook it. Yeah. They don't cook it. They put it on a hot plate. It cooks and sizzles as you walk it to your table. It's an amazing little spot.
Actually, that one's a funny one because I'm living in China for quite a while, and that's super popular here. They got it I'm living in Macau. It's in Macau. It's in Hong Kong. It's all around the place, that one. So it's popular with these guys too.
Yeah, no, we went. Well, we were going from Sydney to Thailand. We stopped in Singapore for a ONE FC, watched the fights, met up with Heath Sims over there, and we ended up doing a pepper lunch in Singapore as well. So I know they're very popular in other parts of the world. And like I said, I think there's only one in the entire United States.
So just to jump over to some of your fighting career, etc. You fought in a few different divisions of middleweight, light heavy, and heavy. Is that correct in MMA?
Yeah, I was willing to fight anywhere. I mean, I definitely, I was a competitor. I wanted to compete. I wanted to win, but ultimately I'm a prize fighter. So wherever I was going to get paid to fight, and whatever weight that was, whatever organization, whatever continent or weight category, I mean, as a prize fighter, you got to be willing to take the fights when they present themselves.
And just to get the ball rolling, I wondered what you think in those couple of weight divisions, the current sort of champions. If you take a prime Matt Lindland against some of those current champions in UFC, what do you think would be the outcome? So you got like Adesanya, Blakovic, and Ngannou at the moment. How do you think you'd go with these guys?
Man, we got some good guys. I mean, the sport is evolving so fast. I would like to envision myself to, in my prime to be competing with all the best guys in the world. And I certainly did at my time. And if I was fighting, still I would want to fight the best guys I could get my hands on. But I mean, the talent has really increased. But I think my knowledge and experience in the sport would probably help me prevail in some of those fights. But again, I learned after you hit 40, man, fighting is probably not the sport you should be doing.
That's true. That's true. I think your style in particular would have been quite a spoiler for a couple of those fighters, right? I'm not so much about Ngannou. He seems to be able to knock their head off just about anyone, but I think you could have proved a spoiler against a couple of those current champions, right?
It's kind of hard to get a really good shot in if you got your body locked up against your opponent, and they're trying to hit you like this while you're clinching them. So I mean, I utilized the clinch because that was my background in Greco Roman Wrestling. I was very, very adept in that position, and a lot of even current athletes still they don't understand the intricacies and the just the unbalancing that you can do in that position. And plus, wearing your opponents down. I mean, if you're constantly fighting in the clinch, you're really making them use a lot of energy. And there was when I coach and when I fought, I always had like an acronym in my mind about MMA, and it was like minimize the amount of energy I'm expending, maximize the amount of energy I'm imposing on my opponent, and attack effectively as possible. And that's what I try to impose my will and my style on my opponents to put them in a position. I don't think there probably wasn't too many fights where I was the superior striker. So I wanted to put that fight in the clinch. I wanted to, take it to the ground where I did submit a lot of opponents and finished a lot of guys either with ground and pound, controlling top position, doing a lot of damage, or working a submission hold in those positions. And usually my submission holds presented themselves against guys that had more jiu-jitsu backgrounds. They would go to the ground, and I just fought a little differently than a traditional jiu-jitsu fighter, even though, now I do train as a jiu-jitsu fighter. And after the games, I'm really looking forward to going out to New York and meeting up with Coach Enzo Gracie and receiving my black belt. Because since I retired from fighting, I put the gi on. I never trained with the gi until I got out of that sport, because I don't think that mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu are the same sport. I think they're entirely different. Use elements of them. I certainly have trained with a lot of really good jiu-jitsu guys and learned got a lot of knowledge, and really took a lot of things I learned, made them my own, and use those submissions to finish opponents. But yeah, it was today's fighters are really, really good, and they're very well rounded. So I'm not sure how well I would do right now, and certainly not at 51. I wouldn't be able to compete with those athletes.
Yeah. So just to get into kind of obviously this podcast that I've created at the moment is basically trying to catch up with gentlemen exactly like yourselves that have got the lifetime experience in combat sports. I think there's a lot we can learn from you. And I wanted to ask you firstly, obviously working in, starting in combat sports, especially as a wrestler or even entering MMA, there's not a lot of reward, like financial reward or this type of thing. So I want to know, like, what are the rewards that you found through the combat sports? Like what has been beneficial to you in the early days and even going forward to now? What are your key sort of defining things that you've gained from being involved in combat sports?
Well, I mean, life in general is a struggle, and it's we wrestle with problems. We struggle with difficulties in life, and I think it's a great metaphor for life is the fighting, is the wrestling, it's all a struggle. And I think I've learned how to adapt and overcome, and no matter what the problem, the situation, there is a solution, there is a way around it, over the problem, through the problem, whether you got to punch your way through it or step over that problem, you got to deal with adversity, and you got to deal with struggle, and just being able to know how to approach those. I was just dealing with prostate cancer a year ago, and I knew I was going to be in for a little bit of a battle, and it was like, okay, this is a fight. I'm fighting cancer. I'm not fighting another opponent, but I'm taking on another struggle. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I got back to Colorado Springs. I was doing the social distancing thing in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon, out at the coast in my cabin out there, and enjoying the fishing and all that. But I knew that fishing and paddleboarding wasn't going to prepare me for a fight. So I got back to Colorado Springs and started training, put in an 8-week training camp before I started my cancer radiation treatment, and continued to train throughout that process of getting treatments, and still continuing to train. But I definitely put together a really good, training camp to prepare for that battle. And so I think that's another good lesson to learn is no matter what that obstacle is, you've got to focus on how you're going to prepare, how you're going to attack it. You got to come up with a plan and a strategy, just like you do in a fight. You got to look at tendencies as your opponent. You got to look at what your best abilities are, and you want to avoid, your opponent's, best qualities, and put them in a position like we were talking about earlier, where I felt like I could dominate most opponents within the clinch position. And so I would want to, put my opponents in that clinch, especially if I was fighting a much better striker. And there's a few fights where I did want to stand out in front, stand with guys and throw some more punches, and maybe not use my takedowns as much, because I felt like we were pretty even on the striking. But if I got in any trouble, I felt like, okay, we're going to need to take this fight to the ground and work from the ground. But I think it's just looking at problems and how you're going to attack them, and coming up with a really good game plan.
You remind me, talking about it reminds me of Goggins, how he's always mentally preparing for the bad things that happen in life through his exercise, etc. So it's kind of interesting that you use that, the toughness gained through wrestling to get through the other challenges. How did the actual the radiation therapy affect your body, out of interest?
It was supposed to make me tired and stuff, but I don't think I had a lot of symptoms, to tell you the truth, honestly. There's really only two ways to treat that. One was prostatectomy, where you remove the prostate, and the other one is targeted beam radiation. And I guess there is a third option, which would be like implanting seeds. But there's a lot more complications with both those other options. So I chose the least invasive option. And I think the training that I put in, prior to going into that, I think I was well prepared. And so I didn't have a lot of the symptoms that were suspected to happen. I wasn't tired. I wasn't dealing with anything like that. So yeah, sick and tired was what they said could happen. But I felt like, okay, I'm going to get in shape before I do this. I'm going to be physically fit and fight ready.
And I wonder if for you as well, your level of discomfort or whatever will be so different than your common man anyway, that you might not even notice what might be a strong symptom for someone might not be much of a symptom for you, to be honest.
Well, that's true. I think probably wrestlers and fighters tend to have a higher pain threshold than most people, but that's something that's just developed. It might hurt you in some situations, because you're not recognizing symptoms of aging. It's like, I turned 50, and it was like the check engine light came on. It was like, wait a minute, we got to fix this, and now, it's just the normal wear and tear of a combat athlete. Shoulders are going out, and knees, and fortunately, no back problems, no back, neck or back, no hips, just other joints seem to give me some problems. Like if I punch a heavy bag now, it's like, man, that hurts my knuckles, it hurts my wrist, it hurts my elbow, my shoulder. It's like everything like is just like, man, think I might have wore those joints out a little bit.
That must have been ongoing for a long time though, right? With different injuries here and there in the sports.
I think that was one of the blessings I had throughout most of my career. I've definitely, suffered an injury here and there. I've torn muscles. I've had to have surgeries, but for the most part, I think I'm a pretty durable athlete. I'm not a big, bulky, guy. I've got longer limbs and more lanky of a fighter. I think that the longer muscles help me be a little more durable. I always worked on my strength and my flexibility, but I was never trying to be as big and as bulky as I could, because I do understand that muscles tend to tear when they start getting bigger and bulkier. They're more apt to tear, and I wanted to be a little leaner and more flexible and supple. So, I could take the damage that, you get in the ring and throughout training. I mean, it's not even in the ring. It's the daily training that you're doing. And, I think I've learned a lot, now I think, we probably sparred a little too much and too often. And I think maybe I could have had better performances just sparring less, knowing what I know now.
It actually takes me to a point I was planning on talking to you about. The early days of training with Team Quest in MMA, etc. Just listening to people talking about it, seeing some of the old footage, etc. It sounded like you were quite sparring based, and kind of when you compare to these days, like you said, a lot, maybe a bit too full on, maybe an old sort of style, lots of heavy sparring based. Is that true?
Well, I think we came from a wrestling approach to where it was definitely sparring. It wasn't fighting. We were definitely, I mean, it's protect yourself at all times is kind of the rule. That's an unspoken rule. You need to protect yourself at all times, but you also have training partners that, are going to help you throughout the camps, throughout the training, and you want to protect your training partner. So you don't ever want to, take a submission hold that's going to damage your training partners, or, try to knock them out or injure them. These are your partners. These are the guys that are helping you prepare, and vice versa. And so you want to take care of one another, but taking care of one another also means pushing your training partners to that next level. And that's a fine line, isn't it? Of we want to push really hard and we want to get a lot of good solid training in, but we don't want to damage each other. And I think we usually spar a couple times a week. Maybe I would limit that to sparring once a week. And I would have to look at how I train now with the information I have available and the knowledge I have. I mean, science is really starting to catch up. I mean, the sport was brand new. We were just starting. I mean, when I started, SCG owned the UFC. I fought for SCG, and then Zuffa ended up buying the company while I was a part of that, and they acquired my contract at that time. So it was a brand new sport. So we knew what we knew. We knew how to train and how to prepare for competition and combat. But the striking's a whole different element to that. And in wrestling, we can spar pretty hard without throwing any strikes. And when you're adding strikes into the equation, I mean, some of those strikes, I mean, I've dropped dudes with liver kicks, and put them on the ground in training. And that was never my intent, and I was to hurt somebody, but we definitely sparred hard.
I
And
just
sometimes there's that element of he raised his level, I'm going to raise my level, I'm going to like, and it almost became a fight, but at the end of the day, I can never say like there was like somebody was out of control in our room. Everything was calculated and done. I mean, Chael loves to tell these great stories, and they're stories, and he's a wonderful storyteller. But there was a time where a gentleman came into my gym, and he got a little frustrated because, again, I was the wrestler. I was supposed to take him down. I wasn't supposed to stand and box with him and kick. And it was training. So what am I going to do when I'm training with a better striker? Is I'm going to stand and strike. I'm not going to take him down. I don't have an ego because I'm not trying to win in training. I'm trying to win in the ring. and in competition. So when I'm sparring with this guy, he was getting a little frustrated, started throwing some big overhand rights. And I'm like, okay, I mean, maybe that one was accident, and then a couple more big ones. And it wasn't out of control. It was very deliberate. I was like, okay, I'm going to test this again. I'm going to hit him with a good jab. And if he throws a big overhand, I'm going to fucking try to knock his head off. And that happened. I hit him with a couple jabs and he came with a big overhand right. I slipped it, clinched him, started kneeing him in the face. He tried to get away. I used some pressing footwork across 2 full mats, which is, how many meters is that? But it's about 40 feet. I ran him into a corner and dropped him with a knee to the face. And then as I was going to stomp on his head, I just stopped and I thought he had the message, so I thought he was
That was
and he
Scott
was very
Smith, right?
clear. He was very clear about that message and packed his bag, went home the next day. But, I just don't think that's the way. I mean, he was an outsider coming in, like, understand our culture. We train hard, but we're not trying to hurt each other. And that's what I was talking about. And this was somebody that wasn't a teammate of mine, wasn't, part of our gym. He was a guest. And I just felt like he broke the rules and he needed to be punished.
Yeah, that was actually as funny as what popped to my mind then when you were saying taking care of your sparring partners. You certainly took care of that guy. But yeah, no, I understand. There's a time and a place for certain things, and there's certain etiquette, etc., that people need to follow in gyms. And
Yeah,
you
I
set
know,
that
but I
line.
think some of the guys in the gym that day were they thought I'd lost control, but I hadn't. I hadn't lost control. It was very intentional, and it was a very clear message I wanted to send. But apparently, one of our coaches spoke to Randy Couture, and the message got back to him. And Randy was out of the gym that day. He was doing the interview or a photo shoot or something, some kind of publicity thing, and he'd got wind of this, that I'd lost control, and I tried to explain it to him that I didn't, but he still wanted me to make an apology to the entire team, and which I did out of respect for Randy, and so. I made an apology that if I scared anybody, like, just know that, that could happen to you too if you fuck around and you want to try to hurt somebody inside the gym. It's not appropriate.
Yeah. I actually I saw Randy talking about that too, that you came out and made an apology. If that upset you, was that? I can't remember. It's actually funny because I went to look you up because I just wanted to see some podcasts on you to, understand a little bit more about you, and all these stories pop up. It's the first thing that comes up on YouTube when you do a search for you podcast. It's like Charles telling these crazy stories, and then you see like you said, he embellishes it a bit because the same story told by someone else like Couture isn't quite as amazing as when Charles tells it, right? He's definitely
No, he's a
storyteller.
wonderful storyteller, and I think that's why he's doing so great on his podcasting now, and he's building a pretty good audience.
And just on what we're talking about in the gym, did you see that little arm crank thing with Orlando Sanchez and Sean Strickland? Did you see that little clip?
I didn't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, there was a little. It was just a very small thing, but it kind of went viral. So Orlando Sanchez and this Sean Strickland were just moving around doing some grappling, and it was apparently preparation for Sean Strickland fighting. And he sort of caught Sean Strickland, put his arm on the inside, and he cranked it a little bit. Like, it was just to give him a little touch. Like, for you, it would be like nothing, but on the internet, it blows up and everyone's going, yeah, that's a dick move to be doing that in training. But then there was this whole backstory of how Sean Strickland was just being a dick in the gym, and he kind of deserved this little crank on the elbow. But yeah, it goes back to the same thing. There's certain codes, etc., in the gym that people have to abide by, and if not, they might get a touch up here and there. Wasn't really a big thing.
There is so much nonverbal communication that goes on within training, and that if you're not getting the message with this nonverbal communication, I mean, I could stop and explain it to you, but I don't have time. I mean, we're in the gym for what, 90 minutes, we're in and out. I don't have time to stop and explain this to you. You should absorb the culture and you should fit in and figure it out, especially if you're an elite athlete.
And still ongoing with the feeling of the gym and the team quest where you guys were at. You're with some killers in there yourself: Nate Corey, Henderson, Ed Herman, Chris Lieben, Evan Tanner, Randy Couture, etc. Such a competitive type of environment. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Pat Healy. I mean we had an
Yep.
incredible lightweight. Ryan Schultz was out of that group. Dave Jensen. I mean we had a lot of great guys for a few generations, too, as well. I mean there was a lot of really great athletes coming through our program at that time, and we were continuing to develop guys. And I think the biggest difference between Team Quest and probably a lot of other schools is that we developed athletes. They came to us with no skills whatsoever, maybe a taekwondo background, and okay, you got good footwork, we can start with that. Or okay, you know how to wrestle, you did this in high school, you've got a fundamental base, you can start with that, and we can help bring you up to the next level. And we did that with so many guys throughout our program. And there was a lot of guys that fought above their abilities, for sure. And some of those names you just mentioned, I mean, tough dudes. They grew up in tough environments, and they had a lot of mental toughness and resiliency. And you can teach skills. I mean, skills can be taught and learned if you have a guy that's willing to put the work and time in. And we did. I mean, we put a lot of time and a lot of training in within our gym. And then a lot of us would leave and go outside. Randy did this a lot. He'd go up with Matt Hume and Maurice Smith up to Seattle, Jeff Monson, Dennis Hall. Those guys would start finding their way down to Portland. We back and forth. Seattle to Portland's like 3 hours away. Olympia is only 2.5 hours away. And then I'd start heading over to Hawaii to train with BJ Penn, or I'd go out to California to train with Hackelman. And I mean, I was just always looking to get better and go learn something from somebody that I didn't know, bring it back to our gym, share it, and expand that knowledge base. And we'd pick up a skill, and it was like, okay, this is what I learned. And we'd bring it back, and Randy and I'd play around in the position. It would be like, well, what if we did it like this and adjust it a little bit? We'd make those techniques our own. And with our knowledge of wrestling and background, we could in training, we could take techniques that other guys used and not do it the exact way they did, but take those principles and apply it to our own styles. And I think that's what we were really, really good at, was being good students and being very coachable, but then also learning how to adapt that and then share that knowledge with the other teammates so we could train and drill those situations and positions.
And in your gym, you're saying you're adapting it to your way. Do you feel like you're able to compare between other gyms and your own? Do you think the intensity in your gym, as far as everyone coming from a competitive wrestling background, etc., was higher than the other gyms, or was there a comparison like that?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've been to gym. I mean, the gyms that I've been to, Militich Fighting Systems and the Pit and BJ Penn School and AKA, and what was Hume's school up in Seattle? I can't remember the name of his school, but Matt Hume's school. I mean, no, I mean, maybe just different, not any higher or less high, but just different. Maybe they did more stand up and we did more grappling, but as I recall, we were always trying to work on our stand up because that was our kind of the area that we didn't grow up with. So we wanted to improve on the most. So I think we spent more of our time working on our weaker areas and, less time working on the areas that we were already pretty proficient in.
Yeah. On that point, it's kind of interesting the way the sports evolved a bit. In the beginning, people didn't really accept the grappling styles as much. Yeah, they didn't like people being on the ground as much. But now there seems to be more of an appreciation of that. You've got guys like Khabib that are still popular, even though they're heavily grappling based. Do you think that your style would be more accepted now, and maybe you would have had more opportunities if it was like current day with your style?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people in the early days equated ground fighting to like maybe a Hoist Gracie, like they're on their back, they're losing, and that was never a position that we wanted to be in on their back. And I've trained guys that, maybe their background's in jiu-jitsu, and I would explain that to athletes, and sometimes they would just flat out disagree. It's like, it appears that you're losing if you're on your back. I mean, yes, we've seen arm bars, we've seen triangles, we've seen, double wrist locks and submissions being finished from the bottom. We've seen guys on the bottom win. But if it goes to the judge's decision, how are they going to view that? Same thing with your back against the cage. I think it's like, I've put you against the cage. I'm in control of this fight. I've put you on the mat. I'm in control of where this fight is. So I think there was a perception maybe in the early days of fighting from general public that certainly not us. We were very aware of what guys were capable of off of their back, and so we would, really work to avoid those positions. I mean, I can think of controlling inside ties, so guys weren't setting up arm bars. Never put one arm in, two arms in, two arms out, kind of principles. Those fundamental basic positions to where, you're pretty much going to negate the submissions off the back. But I just think that the fan base has become more knowledgeable of the sport. They're more appreciative. I mean, you fight like that in Japan, even in the early days, they were very appreciative of that kind of fighting style. But Americans seem to want to see somebody knocked out on the canvas instead of fighting on the ground and looking for, these technical submission positions. They just didn't have the knowledge base of how effective a grappling art can be in a mixed martial arts type of environment and sport. And I think now we all know how effective grappling arts are. And I think most of our UFC current champions have some sort of grappling background, whether it's jiu-jitsu or wrestling.
Yeah, I think your style really, like, I think looking at it from the contemporary perspective, I think it will be received so well. Really, it's such an aggressive style. Like, people don't like people that are standing off these days and less worried about the whole ground fighting. They want people to engage, and you're always moving forward, trying to engage that clinch and get it moving. So I think it'll be very well received now, actually.
Well, thank you. So I'm a bit of a pioneer is what you're saying.
That's it. So, some things I wanted to touch on, more theoretical, I guess, or from listening to some of your talks. You mentioned about the warrior mentality, or people being warriors, that it's often overlooked in this day and age. I just want to know your thoughts on that. Like, what are the benefits of having people that are warriors around? What it's like to be kind of a modern day warrior in a sense?
Well, I definitely think that your first role as a husband, as a father, is to protect your family. Number one, like, protect your family and then provide for your family and, look after them. And I think, cultures throughout history have always had a warrior class. And I just don't, it's become more of a sport now. So we don't need to fight a whole lot of wars. We got F-15 bombers, like Biden said. I mean, what are you going to do with a gun? We're gonna bring nuclear bombs against our own people. And I think he threatened the Americans with bombing us with nukes and F-15s. But it was like, you still want to have that spirit, that warrior spirit, for whatever that situation. I was talking earlier, I shared with you about going through some cancer treatment, and it was like, I know how to do this, and it comes from my warrior approach to, take on the fight, not back away from that fight. And whatever that challenge is, I think you can bring that mentality to it. Just like, my role now as a coach, I want these guys to understand that it is a fight. Yes, it's a technical art, and it's a wrestling match. We're not doing strikes, but I want you to go out there with that fighting spirit. And that's what I've always really appreciated about Japanese culture is they have that Bushido, just spirit in them, and they're just such a warrior culture. It's something that I appreciate, and I don't know if enough men really appreciate that these days. I certainly think that some guys do, because the audience for mixed martial arts is continuing to grow and becoming global. And you start to travel the world, and you look at, you look at other cultures, and Americans are just pussies in general. I mean, we really are. I mean, you go to any of these Eastern Bloc countries, and former Soviets or former Yugoslavias, countries where these guys where they had to fight for what they want, and it's just a different mentality than the Americans, and it's okay. I don't know if your audience is more global or more American, but I think generally speaking, I'm not saying the entire country is a bunch of wusses, but I just don't think we have that fighting spirit, and I think the American culture, especially for me, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, and that was the first settlement west of the Rockies was in Astoria, and Lewis and Clark went from the middle of the country in Missouri, where the people lived, and they ventured all the way to the West Coast to discover this land, and you had to fight just to survive daily out there, and then they sent over more people to build that settlement. These were some tough dudes. I mean, these guys were really, really hard. I don't know if anybody today could sustain that kind of a lifestyle anymore. And I'm a little bit envious that I don't get to live in that time, and got to experience that, because we are so soft and comfortable. I mean, if I don't want to cook, if I don't want to go out and gather food, hunt food, I could just go to the grocery store. I can order it on Uber Eats. I mean, it's ridiculous how easy life is now. And we're talking about like our culture is so hard, and the depressions are way up here. Like everybody's depressed now. Like life's easier than it's ever been in the entire history of mankind. And we're complaining. I mean, we should be really grateful that we have all of this technology and knowledge and experience and wisdom that we've learned from previous generations, but we've lost a lot of the resiliency and toughness. I would like to see, get back to that a little bit more, and that attitude and that kind of a mentality. But certainly from my combat athletes that I coach, which, these are some of the best guys in the world. These are guys that are going to the Olympic Games, and each category only has 16 athletes that qualified all over the world. So we've narrowed it down to the best 16. Now we're looking to see who's going to get those 3 medals. And it's going to be exciting.
That's very exciting. So yeah, you mentioned things are just so comfortable. Yeah. And I think that the thing that people can do, like you mentioned, is being put into these uncomfortable situations, be it through sport or some other activity that can really benefit, right? Especially when you're talking about new generations that are so comfortable, they need to experience that struggle in life, right? And the only way to really do that I can think of is through something like a martial art, a wrestling, a BJJ, a stand-up fighting, or other activities, be it hunting, fishing, being out in the wilderness, something that builds a bit of character, right?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think every young man should be required to do some kind of martial arts. I'm even pro, mandatory military service. I think, that, even if it was just for a couple of years, it's like everybody should experience that bit of combat where they should understand the consequences of combat. And we were talking earlier, like everything has consequences. It's like, okay, you're gonna throw a big overhand right at me. There's going to be a consequence if you continue to do that. If you don't get the message that is inappropriate in this training environment, there is going to be a consequence. And so give those guys the consequences that they deserve. And I think we've eliminated that. We've softened it all up. I mean, especially, you hear about like helicopter parents where they come in and they, and anytime there's a problem, they fly in and they solve the problem, they fix it, they take away the adversity, they take away the struggle. And all you're doing is perpetuating weakness. And if you did that to your children, you're gonna produce a weak child. And I said I see lawnmower parents even more than I see these helicopter parents, which my definition is a lawnmower is you go ahead of your child, and you mow down all the problems. You just you make the easiest path they can have, and you think you're going to develop a well-rounded human being. You're going to develop a total pussy that doesn't know how. I mean, that's why we have cry closets in colleges now, and safe spaces and trigger warnings, because we don't know how to deal with any kind of struggle and adversity. And I think that's a very sad, for our culture.
I've never even heard of that cry closet before. I've heard it. We've got at my work, they've actually got a room you can go and scream in, but I haven't heard of a crying closet. That's a new one for me.
I don't know. They have those.
That's amazing. Yeah, lovely. Moving on from that, you mentioned about training and having that fight mentality when you're training. You said when you were a young kid, you were bullied, and that when you started wrestling, you viewed it as learning to fight. That's what you were doing in the training. And how important is that mentality to keep that in mind when you're training wrestling, when you're training any other martial art, that it's a fight and you're learning to compete in a real fight situation or a competition situation.
Well, I think if you're just looking to go enjoy martial arts and just have fun, get in shape, I don't know if it's as important, but you do need to be aware that it is a combat sport you're training and a real martial art. But I think if you're a competitive athlete, and especially an elite athlete, I think it's critical that you understand that this is a fight. This guy's trying to do damage to you. He's trying to take, money away from your family. He's trying to hurt you. He's trying to damage your body. I mean, so you have to be willing to impose that on your opponents, and whatever that situation is, and everything's fair when in between the bells. When the bell blows, it's like, here's the rule set, and anything within that rule set I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna look for the gray areas as well in that rule set.
Yep. And on the rule sets, etc. I'm also interested in some of the things that you touched on that I listened to about philosophies of different areas. Philosophies of wrestling first. Would you be able to touch on your ideas about what the philosophies behind wrestling? You mentioned about being brave, courageous, blah blah blah. Anything you can sort of extend on in that?
Well, I think having a good philosophy in life is important. Whatever that is for your life. Mine is simply just be bold, courageous, take action. Take action for, like, do it. Especially if you're a little bit concerned and nervous, it's like, do it. Because you need to face those fears and walk towards them. And I think along that path, you inspire others to be bold and courageous. And so we definitely can transform our culture from, cry closets to more of a warrior type culture. But this is going to take time, and we're fighting upstream. I mean, it's definitely a fight, upstream against this culture war that we're up against. So I mean, my philosophy is that's just a general life philosophy. That's interesting that you found that somewhere in an article or something, and I appreciate you doing that research, because I think that is a very important philosophy. And I just did a talk today for I think there was about 600 wrestling coaches throughout our country that was on this Zoom podcast today, or live, I don't know what you call it, webinar, that's what you call it. And I talked about the coaching with a father's heart, and that's all about showing love and appreciation and treating your athletes like you would treat your own children, and really showing that love. And I don't think I always had that same mindset. I think probably when I was coaching Chael and some of my other athletes that went on to win world and Olympic medals and NCAA champions, I think I was coaching with love, but it was more of like a big brother love. It was like, I'm going to toughen you up. I'm going to get you ready. I think now that I can't fight them as much as I could, I can get in and spar with them a little bit, but I can't push these guys that are at an elite level in their early 20s, to that level. So it's kind of a different approach, but it's still the same philosophy of coaching with love and a heart. But maybe it's different from a big brother's love to a father's love, and that's just how you treat your athletes and how you help them prepare. And they want to know that they're appreciated. They want to know that you care about them. You're there for them. Just like everybody wants to know they have parents that love them and care for them, right?
Yeah. And you mentioned also like you also mentioned about competing with freedom and love and joy. Just wanting the take on that. Is that, is that kind of like I don't know if it's the same thing, but for me, I kind of think like competing that you should embrace the feeling, because there's something that not everyone gets to feel, right? Like being in a competitive, heightened state, that you're dealing with something that no one else really deals with. Is that what you mean by enjoying it? Like it's just
Yeah,
something,
absolutely. I think
yeah,
I think you understood what I was saying very well, and I'll try to explain it for your audience. But I think what happens is we put all this work and time and training into honing our craft and getting really good, at our art. And then we go through a training periodization plan where we prep for a fight, and then we get to that fight and we're scared. We're afraid to go out and try things because I might make a mistake. I might do something wrong. And all these things that start going through your head that, and I think I struggle with that a lot. I probably didn't overcome that until I earned my Olympic medal. And then the following year, I won a silver medal at the World Championships, upper weight category. But it took me a while, and it wasn't fear of stepping in the ring. It was fear of I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose. And I want to win. And it's like, well, so does he. So does your opponent. You both want to win. So I think the guy that has the most fun and enjoys it the most is the guy that gets to go out there with the most freedom. The other guy, your opponent, if he's dealing with that kind of mind game stuff where he's like, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to try something. They're going to wait. They're going to hang back. And you got to attack in this sport. It's all about, going out and imposing your will on another man and taking what he wants. And so that's fun to me.
yeah. And you mentioned just then about the fear. I also heard you say about like a couple of different fears, that underperforming being one. Obviously, like I've been in competition, but not obviously anywhere near your level in stand-up fighting and BJJ, and the people around you. So you got your friends in the audience. It's a pressure in itself, and you don't want to look bad in front of these people. Obviously, you've been through all types of competition. What did you do, and then what do you tell your guys now? Like how's the best way to get them to handle it?
Oh, I think you can only focus on what you're in control of. Can I move my feet? Can I extend my jab? Can I follow with a cross? It all has to be what you're in control of. You're not in control of your opponent whatsoever. He's in control of him. So once you realize that you have to impose your will, it's all about what I'm capable of doing. And the higher your skill set is, the more you're capable of doing. But you cannot be hesitant. You've got to go out and press forward. And my fighting style was a lot of pressing forward. And there's a time to lay back and wait, but maybe that's after I've already scored or hurt this guy. Now I'm winning. He can come to me and I can counter strike or counter attack. But I think it always has to be about imposing your will on your opponent first. And can I attack an underhook? Can I move my feet? Can I close that distance? What can I do? And if you're only focused on those areas and not thinking about, okay, what is he going to do? Like that cognitively, that's just a mess. Your brain doesn't work that way. You can, and it shouldn't work that way because you can't control that. I mean, we can't control what our politicians are doing. So why are we really like, oh my God, I can't believe that, Biden put this policy in or Trump put that policy in. It's like, we're not in control of that. The only thing I'm in control of is, who I cast my ballot for in the next election. And so after that, like, let it go. So I think that's the same thing with fighting is like, what can I affect? What can I control? Can I manage my diet, my strength training? Can I do all these things ahead of competition to prepare? Yes. Okay. Now, once I step in the ring, what am I in control of? So it's really just, I would tell my athletes to think about what you're in control of. What can you do? And sometimes it's not much, in Greco Roman Wrestling, We don't want to be reaching for our opponents. We want to keep our arms tight to our body. So can I hold my elbows right to my body so I don't give up these underhook positions? Can I get my wrist out? Can I make the first contact? I think that's a very important, imposing your will, making first contact, not waiting for him and then deciding I'm going to counter. I'm a step behind. And so it is about, what are you going to do? What is your game plan? How are we going to execute that game plan? You just start breaking it down step by step. And by the time you step in the ring, it's like, move your feet, get an angle, which is similar with striking, right? I mean, move your feet, get an angle. That's what you can be in control of if you're striking. Same thing in a clinch position. Can you move your feet? Can you move your opponent? Can you get an angle? I mean, they're very, you break it down to its most basic element. You don't really have to think about what you need to do after you get the angle. Once you quarter step on somebody and you see an opening, you're going to come with that straight left, right? I mean, you're going to drop the hammer on that guy. You don't have to think, okay, move my feet, then throw the punch. Because as soon as you see that angle, you've trained for it. So know that you're going to drop that punch, or you're going to attack the body and throw your opponent on the mat.
Yep. And talking about that, like, you're teaching your guys these different techniques of how to, overcome fear, example, focusing on technique, etc., tactics. You also mentioned about pouring bravery into athletes. Is that part of that you're just giving them the technique to be able to get through things, or it's greater than that?
You got to encourage guys. You got to inspire them. You got to encourage them. You got to motivate them. And encouraging is literally pouring courage into someone else, building them up, helping them with that confidence. And, I mean, the guys that are going out there, everybody in that bracket of the Olympic Games it can win. And it's your match to lose. I mean, they're on any given day, and that's why the world medals and Olympic medals say on this day, on this day, you were the best. Because if that match happened the following week or the next day, it might be a different competitor that was winning. So it's really about having a good day and being on top of your game that moment that the competition comes. And we can't always be peaking either. I mean, there's peaks and valleys, and after a fight, there's a huge valley. I'm gonna come down from my training, and I'm gonna work on some base before I start another training cycle. So you can't stay high all the time. So you've got to plan your training and your periodization out to where you are going to peak at the right time. And that's putting in a fight camp together, with I give you an example. Like, BJ Penn asked me to be his wrestling coach when he was fighting Matt Hughes. And I love BJ. I've trained with him a lot. I've learned a lot from him, and I wanted to help him, but I told him, I said, I cannot be your wrestling coach, but I would be your MMA coach. I would run this fight camp if you want me to, but I'm not going to be one of your coaches. I'm not going to have the kickboxing guy tell you to kick the guy in the head. The boxing coach wants to see you, jab him up and then follow up with your cross. The jiu-jitsu coach wants you to choke him out. And it's like, we're going to come up with a game plan. This isn't boxing, jiu-jitsu, MMA. This is mixed martial arts. And I'll do that, and say, he's like, oh, let me think about it. He got back to me a couple of days later and was like, okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? And I said, well, it looks like I'm going to organize the whole camp. You're going to have one guy in charge, because I've been around BJ enough to understand that if he creates enough chaos in his camp, that he's in charge. And then nothing really gets done. He just does what he wants to do. And sometimes that's just going out and surfing today, and it's an easy day. I'm going to surf. I need recovery, or whatever that is. And if so he said, okay, but what does that look like? I said, well, it's an 8-week training camp. Oh my God, I've never done 8 weeks. I said, well, it's an 8-week camp if you want me to run it. And here's how I would do it. I would bring you out. We'd train at Team Quest for a week. Then I'd send you to Colorado Springs and train with the Olympic team for 2 weeks. You're gonna work on some wrestling skills, and you're gonna get in really good shape. Then you're gonna come back to me, and we're gonna put this plan together. And then the last week we're gonna go to Hawaii. Week 8 is fight week, and all of a sudden it started making more sense to him. He's like, let's do it. And I think that I think it was like a minute 30 where he got double underhooks on Matt Hughes and foot swept him and took his back and choked him. And it was, we put together a game plan and he executed it well. So it's about getting guys out of their comfort zone. He was not comfortable with an 8-week camp. But once I started explaining to him, breaking it down and why we needed 8 weeks to periodize this training plan, it started making more sense and he was open to it. But it had to be a hard line with a guy like him, because it was like, I'm not going to just come in and coach you up on wrestling. And if I'm going to be involved, I want to be involved in the whole process and see it from start to finish.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just jumping back a little bit, what you said about any given athlete on any given day that you peak and trough, etc. I was just watching your Olympic medal competition just this morning. I'd never seen it before. Just to have a look, and in that it was only a 3-point difference, right? It was 3-0 that match. Just wondering, is that it? Like you said, on any given day could have been switched. You could have been the one that was 3 points up and held the lead. Is that something like a burden to you? Does you feel that, like, because it's such a big competition, it would have made a big difference to you? Is it something like a monkey on your back, or you've let that go and you're happy with the achievement and everything?
Yeah,
just out of interest.
I certainly wasn't looking for a silver medal. I was looking to win that tournament, stand on top of the podium, and have the national anthem play and the American flag be raised. But he was better that day, or he got the opportunity in parterre early while we were fresh. I got the opportunity late while, we just battled for 5.5 minutes and my arms were completely shot, and he had great defense, so I couldn't turn Cardone off in the finals. A year later, I wrestled Menchnikov in the semifinals in the same exact situation, but I had been there before. I got on parterre late in the bout and executed my lift for 5 points and won the match. And
so like you said, any given day, right? The right thing happened at the right time, it would have been yours. Damn. Yeah. But still, you got the win after.
Sports. I mean, that's any sport. That's any sport. That doesn't just apply to combat sports. But
true. So just touching on, we're talking about philosophies of different areas. I just wanted to, it's a common thing. I've heard you talk about it before, but I think it's very pertinent to life. And what I kind of do in the channel for is your philosophy of, getting things done and achieving success in life. Obviously, you've achieved your success in so many different things. I know you've been involved in a lot other than just wrestling and just MMA. I just wanted you to talk a little bit on, working towards goals and how to achieve goals and, basically working hard, your wrestling mentality, how it's led to success in life.
Yeah, well, I didn't. I mean, like I said, I didn't always have a background in combat sports. I started, at 15, started training. Martial arts and wrestling was my base discipline, and I trained multiple disciplines. I wasn't just Greco Roman. I was doing freestyle and college wrestling and high school wrestling as well. And so completely different styles and philosophies and tactics that you want for each of those sports. And once I started to really focus in, and I decided that, Greco-Roman was the path I was going to go, which I think I chose it a little late. I probably should have made some adjustments earlier. I think I would have had, higher performance earlier in my career. I didn't start earning medals till I hit 30. And that's pretty late for a combat athlete, to be quite honest. But I think it's just about setting goals, and I mean, you definitely want to write them down. I mean, you definitely want to write your goals down, and then once you have these big goals, you want to break them down into how many years they're going to take, and then you start looking at a calendar, and you're like, okay, now what do I got to do? Each step down the way, and then you start making out your micro goals, and there definitely is power to putting them on paper. I still have a notebook. It's actually sitting in my drawer right here. This notebook right here is every single goal and how I was going to accomplish this stuff all the way through. It's got some stuff spilt on it, but I mean, this is that was written in 1995, and when I was in Russia for 3 weeks training. I was over there training, and we didn't have internet then in 95, especially not in Russia. And maybe we had it here. I don't know. But internet was pretty late in Russia. And so, I had time. And I think now there's just so many ways to distract ourselves through, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. You can just sit there and you don't sit down and really process and think. I constantly write, and I've got notebooks all over this office. For each month, I have a notebook. I have one for the year, for the goals, for our team that I want to accomplish. It's just about putting things on paper and then figuring and taking action, attacking that. It's not like you put it on paper and you're just like, okay, it's good, it's going to happen. It's like, what's my first step? And it's always about taking that first step. And that's the hardest step, is the first one. It's like, I want to start. You think about the guys that come into, Team Quest now. And we'll see guys that'll pull in our parking lot, Maxime Carl will go out, and he'll come by for like 6 months, and eventually somebody will come in. And then maybe they'll stand in the hallway before the entrance, and then they'll walk around the corner and they're like, so I'm interested in learning some martial arts. They don't even know the questions to ask. And that's where you start to do. You're like, where do I got to go? Okay, I should go to this place because they actually know how to do fighting there. So let me start there. Let me ask the questions. Well, step one is, let's get you on the mat. And that's what we would say, to everybody. Well, let's schedule your first training session, and knowing this is your first training session, here's what to expect. Here's what to prepare for, wear shorts, wear a mouthpiece, bring a water bottle. Just whatever those situations are. This is a grappling class. This is a striking class. Here's what you're going to be shown. Here's what you're going to be learning, and helping people feel comfortable, because a lot of times people are just nervous. They're just nervous to try new things. Change is like the hardest thing in the world to do. And people are very resistant to change. It's like, I get a routine. I like this routine. Well, is that routine working? Can I do something better? And you always got to look at changing and adjusting. And I think 2020 made a lot of people learn that lesson, whether they wanted to or not. It was like, what I'm doing now, I can't do. So I got to figure out a way to pivot and make an adjustment in the way I approach things. And I had to do that even with coaching. There was a period of time for about, it was like February to like August or late August. So from February to late August, I wasn't even capable of coaching. We were distanced and separated. So I had no athletes on the mat. So I started talking to my athletes about, coming up with plans that they could do on their own, if they could find a training partner. Oh, you don't even have a training partner. Okay, well then let's do these conditioning. Let's do these strengths, these skill sets, and we use the Zoom. It's pretty hard to coach over Zoom. I gotta be honest. I've tried it. I'd write plans, and I had other volunteer coaches that could go out all over the country. And so what I did was, I empowered other coaches throughout the country to host different camps in their state that was open. And I know you're in China right now, but in the United States, every state has kind of a different rules and regulations, just like every country in Europe has different rules and regulations. Sweden did one thing, Norway did another, Croatia do another. They're all different. And each state, so some states were like, yeah, you can come in with 30 people or less. Okay, well, we're going to have 30 people at this training camp. And facilities were not hard to find because there wasn't a lot of activity going on. So we were able to get facilities, and I would put plans together. One of my coaches ended up, I'll tell you a little story about this. So, I surveyed the athletes and coaches, how did this go? What did you like about the plans? What did you not like about the training plans? And I kept getting this feedback about Coach Dominguez in Nebraska. And it's Nebraska. You're in the middle of the country. It's hot. It's muggy. I went to school in Nebraska. It's not the greatest place in the United States. There's a lot better places. I'm in Colorado. I look outside. I see the Rocky Mountains. My home state's, in Oregon. I got a coastline. I got mountains. It's green. It's beautiful. but they're in Nebraska, but they had a great camp. And I just, kept prying until I got some answers. It was like, well, Coach Dominguez has this app. It's called Seconds Pro for anybody that's looking, a coach or an athlete that's looking to do that. It's called Seconds Pro. I think it's like $5 app, but it's very robust. And he would take my plans and plug it into this application on his iPad, and he would mirror it on the TV, and every athlete knew the whole plan, start to finish. They knew what was next. They knew how much time was remaining in this training session. You ever been in a training session where the coach is like, okay, just one more? They're like, the coach he's got this vision in his mind. He's like, no, we need to get more in. We need more. And what this happened was they would take my plans and they would plug them into this app, and that was practice. They did not deviate. And so I learned a lot about what, this generation of athletes want. They want more information. That's first and foremost. They want to know why. It's not like because the coach said.
Yeah.
It's why are we doing this today? Why are we training this modality today?
Yep.
Whatever that is. Are we sparring? Are we drilling? Are we play wrestling? Are we doing technique? They want to know why. Then they want to know how long the practice is, what the drills are. So you lay out this practice plan, then you put it up on the TV, and it counts down, like 29 minutes. Well, now I use that for my own, because it's like, I want the most out of my athletes in every training session. So it's like, there's only 29 minutes left. Intensity, keep your intensity high. There's only 16 minutes left, or there's only 2 more rounds, whatever that is. You can see it's going down. It's like training is going to be over soon. Now what mentality do you have with that? Do you have, oh, training is going to be over finally? Or are you like, I only get 2 more rounds. I'm going to get the most out of these rounds. And so it's really about how you communicate with this athlete and how their mindset works. If they're not in the mood, they're going to have that bad attitude of, oh, man, I got 2 more rounds, or I only get 2 more rounds. I mean, it's just a framework of how you look at that and how you approach that. And if you're an elite athlete, you should have that mentality of, I have a sense of urgency because there's only 2 more rounds. I'm going to get the most out of these 2 more rounds. I'm going to grab the best 2 guys in the room to go with those 2 rounds. And so, I did learn a lot during that pandemic, even though I wasn't physically with my athletes. I was still, on Zoom, and I was still calling them and communicating with them, and still wanting to learn more about them and build that relationship, because it all starts with the relationships when you're coaching. It's like, if you don't have that relationship, it's hard to build trust and respect for one another. And you have to have trust and respect. You have to connect before you can correct. You can't come into a room with an athlete you don't know or barely know and say, you need to fix this, you need to make this adjustment. Your arm doesn't go there, it goes under, you're reaching high, your elbow needs to be in a little tighter. Those positions, you have to have a relationship. You have to connect before you can correct. And that takes time. It takes energy, it takes effort, it takes a relationship. And so you have to build these relationships. And even more so now with this generation, they're less trusting. I think maybe because we've been gaslit by media and social media and all that out there, that, we're just, you cannot tell what, fake news, right? I mean, you probably heard that phrase.
Of course.
Over the last few years, there's so much fake news out there. There's so much fake news. I mean, I remember I wrote an article about this ridiculous face mask. It was called the elevation mask, or the altitude mask, or the training mask. They're all the same. You put this on, it's going to make you better. It's like, this thing's bullshit. This thing's completely bullshit. You can stick a sock in your mouth and get the same. And so, first of all, I had a kid coming with the gym. I was like, get on the VersaClimber and do this for 6 minutes, and I was like, he's like, take it off. I'm like, you're not going to wear it? I'm like, there's the trash, and he threw it in the trash. But I wrote this article about, how they had no scientific research behind this, and the fact that the worst case scenario, you're going to get brain hypoxia. Best case scenario, you're going to get a workout, but it's not the best workout because you can't breathe effectively. And breathing is one of our main things. As a martial artist yourself, you know how important breath is in between rounds, in between punches. Wrestling, it's conserving your energy. And so I wrote this article about how this thing was complete bullshit. And then they wrote me another letter from their attorney saying, take that article off your blog, or we're going to sue you. And so instead of taking that off my blog, I published that letter and wrote another letter that said the truth is the ultimate defense. Because if you had any empirical research, double-blind studies that was done, you would have published it. You wouldn't have published anecdotal evidence by athletes that you're paying to say this shit to. So we're constantly being bombarded with these messages that this is the quick fix, this is the cure, this is the you just need this drink or this supplement or this mask, and all of a sudden your skills are gonna go. No, it's time, it's energy, it's repetition, it's hard work. I mean, nothing's easy. Nothing easy. Life's not easy. Life's a struggle, man.
Actually, it's kind of good, Matt, because you mentioned, without me coming into it, you'd mentioned a lot of philosophies about coaching them, which I was going to get onto, but you've covered nearly everything. And then you've gone back to what I was waiting for the key point to come out about life that I've heard you mention before, is that, you learn through your life that, you have to work hard to be successful, and that success doesn't always come easily, that you need to work for it. So this is another key point I just wanted to get from you, which you've just touched on now.
Yeah, you got to set big, crazy goals, like winning an Olympic gold medal. I got to the silver podium twice, but I think if I would have said, oh, I want to get a medal, maybe I wouldn't have medaled. If I said, I want to win, I want to be the best, I'm going to work to be the best. And I fell a little short. It happens.
Yeah.
Am I still salty? Yeah, I still don't have a gold medal. But I'm blessed. I mean, life.
But you beat
great.
the guy that took it away from you, so that's just as good, I think.
It's not about the destination. It's about the journey and the lessons you learn and the fun you had and the relationships you build and the people that you impact. I mean, I just talked to Chris Wilson. Do you remember Chris Wilson? Probably one of his bigger fights was against John Fitch, and totally dominated the first period, lost the fight in a decision, lost the next two rounds, didn't stick with his game plan. His first round, he totally had his game plan down. And John was a wrestler and Chris was a striker, which coming out of Team Quest, you're like, oh, he was probably a wrestler. No, he was actually a Muay Thai fighter that trained with a bunch of wrestlers. But so we came up with a plan for him the fight wasn't going to go on the ground, and it didn't for an entire period. And Chris landed a lot of strikes, and he's in Brazil and he's talking about moving back over. I think he's been over there now like at least 10 years or so. His wife was Brazilian, so they moved over there, but they want to move back to the United States. And we caught up. I was down in San Diego a couple years ago and caught up with Chris Lieben. I mean, all these guys and Chris is doing great. He's married, he's got a kid, he's been sober for now like 2.5 years. I mean, just a lot of great positive stuff happening in all of these guys' lives. I did see, I haven't talked to him, was Dave Jansen. I did see him. He wrote some blog about dealing with a lot of depression. Well, bless him, he still lives in Portland. It's a little rough out there, They got Antifa all over the place, and but a lot of these guys are doing great in other areas of their life now. They're able to apply a lot of what they learned in martial arts and just doing life and raising kids and creating happy, healthy families.
That's good. That's good. It's a good note to kind of end on. I've got one more small question for you, just a random one. You're still following UFC, I take it. You comment on the guys.
I try to, but I don't own a TV. I haven't owned a TV since 2007. It was when WC was still playing. I actually left the gym pretty early to go home. We had an early training session. I really wanted to watch this, and I still to this day I couldn't tell you what the fight was, but it was on my cable channel, and then they took it off, and I was like, give me WEC. And they were like, no, you got to buy the whole package. And I was like, ah, screw it. I don't want TV. And so in 2007, I quit TV, but we'll head to the bar. I'll watch it with my team, my athletes. We'll get a spot and we'll go over. We'll watch a lot of boxing too.
Yep.
Crawford, he trains out here. Bud Crawford trains in Colorado Springs. So we follow him quite a bit. We do watch a lot of UFC, but I don't have TV, so I don't keep up. I think they got the Ultimate Fighter back on now.
Yeah, they got one on the moment.
I haven't watched that. They got like 3 or 4 other shows. I mean, they're blowing up. They're doing great stuff with their organization.
So the question I had with that one was upcoming fight, Sandhagen versus Dillashaw. Are you familiar with those two guys, and what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I am, and I've always been a big fan of TJ, and so I guess I'll root for him, man.
Yeah, pretty tricky one. Sandhagen's a pretty tricky guy, and it looks pretty a little bit more awkward, and different sort of angles.
And Dillashaw's getting a little long in the tooth for sure. For sure, but he's a skilled opponent, very quality guy.
Exactly. All right, Matt. So we've hit over the hour mark, so I'll let you go. I wanted to thank you very, very much for your time. I know you're a busy man. You got a lot on your plate at the moment, especially, and I appreciate that you've given me some time.
Well, you bet, and thanks for accommodating my schedule too. So I know I knew I was a little slow to respond. I was in a camp in Croatia. I just got back for 2 days, and one of those 2 days I went kayaking. The other one was Father's Day, and then the next day I traveled to Atlanta for another camp, and then I had 2 days with my family out in Oregon, and then I got back here on the 4th of July. We started training back up on the 5th, and so for us to get this scheduled right after I got home I think we did pretty well, Toby.
Great. Thank you very much. And also best of luck in Japan, not so far from where I am. So, welcome over this side of the world and enjoy yourself. And I hope everyone does really well.
I will. I love that country and culture and great people. So I'll have a great time.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.